So good morning and welcome to DNKL. It's great to see everybody back. So I'm substituting for Geshe-la. So you can get everybody can get up and run. But I'm here because some of the local Tibetans are putting up more prayer flags. There's a big celebration going up on top of the hill. So we should be there. I'm convinced that we should end class a few minutes early and go and join them. It's a beautiful, beautiful day. A beautiful day in samsara, right? A beautiful day, a beautiful, wonderful, wonderful opportunity to take advantage of our time together and the rest of the day. So to start off, we can set our motivation. So our motivation for coming together to learn about ourselves, the way our minds work. So this class, so most of you have been coming to this class before. For a few of you who may be new to this, so this is not specifically a class about Buddhism. So we try to not talk too much about concepts that are specifically Buddhist. So many of these ideas are universal in nature. So I will try to keep to that principle. So setting our motivation for coming together and learning about ourselves. May we have the courage to explore our own hearts and minds kindly and with respect. May we dispel the demons of our self-cherishing and pride that torment us. May we clear away the storm clouds of depression, loneliness, grief, and self-loathing. May those clouds be blown away through our efforts. May we come to see all others as our teachers on our spiritual path of awakening. And through the hardships that they may cause us, may that give rise to true love and compassion. Okay. So I'm substituting today, and Geshe-la called me late, around 8:30 last night and asked me to do this. So I completely apologize if I'm somewhat scattered. I just threw together some notes, and I thought maybe we could use this as an opportunity to do more as, peer-to-peer review of the verses that we've covered recently. Also, as my public health service announcement, if you're over 50, time to get the shingles vaccine, right? So I had the shingles vaccine, and the second one on Friday, and I'm having what's been very common. I'm having like a reaction to the shot. So I have something going on there, but still, make sure you get the shot. It's a good vaccine. All right, so what I thought we would do, if you're following along with the book, we're on verse 70, and I wanted to go back to, all of these verses are very closely related, and they tend to repeat. So there's a reason for that, because these are very profound in meaning, and there's a relationship as new ideas are introduced. Then Shantideva seems to go back and reinforce or put the new idea in the context of previous ideas. And in that way, the relationship between the thoughts becomes more apparent. So let me go back and just go back to like 67 or even 66. And I'm just going to read the verses, and then that will sort of set the tone for, set the context for the rest of the morning. Since embodied creatures are injured by both animate beings and inanimate objects, why only bear malice to the animate? It follows that I should patiently accept all harm. Should one person ignorantly do wrong and another ignorantly become angry with him, who would be at fault and who would be without fault? Why did I previously commit those actions, because of which others now cause me harm? Since everything is related to my actions, why should I bear malice towards these enemies? When I have seen this to be so, I should strive for what is meritorious in order to certainly bring about loving thoughts between all. And here's verse 70 and 71. For example, when a fire in one house has moved into another house, it is right to get rid of straw and such things that will cause the fire to spread. Likewise, when the fire of hatred spreads to whatever my mind is attached, I should immediately get rid of it for fear of my merit being burned. So, we've been talking about this chapter on patience for several weeks, right? Not several months, several weeks, right? So, in your own words, how would you define patience? What does patience mean to you?
I think it has something to do with the ability to be non-reactive.
Okay, non-reactive. Non-reactive in what kind of situations?
Anything that makes me uncomfortable isn't the way I want it to be.
Okay, so discomfort, so a sense of and expectations as to what situation should look like, how it should play out, and the discomfort arising when those expectations are not met.
Right.
Okay. Great.
Ideally, because I can't always do this, I like to first become aware if something's happening and I feel impatience rising, and then to okay, this is an opportunity to practice patience. Sounds, and And I calm myself down that way. I mean, it's absurd. Now it seems absurd because I don't have these problems with patients. If somebody, I'm driving and then somebody tries to cut me off, okay, as long as I'm okay. And then who knows, if they're racing along, who knows? They may be on their way to the hospital. Somebody may have died.
Right. So that's getting a little bit at the idea of how to identify impatience as it arises, and then the thought process that you would go through to then justify or not really excuse, but to try to see the situation from the other person's perspective. Okay.
I might also start thinking back on other situations where impatience happened.
Okay.
Good. Very beginning, maybe when my mother was impatient with me.
Right. So thinking back in your own life to. Okay. All right. So it seems like any other ideas about patience?
Not to mix metaphors with Shantideva, but there's this quality for me of like being able to just like stand in the fire without trying to constantly run away from like the challenges or the suffering or the pain. And so like having patience with suffering. And then that gives the mind the opportunity to like rework itself, because if I'm not so busy just like trying to change my external circumstances in order to not have any pain, then the mind has to like redo itself.
Right.
And then like the pain is transcended. So yeah.
That's really helpful. Yeah, that's a very good observation. Can everybody hear each other, right? Acoustics are pretty good. So the idea here is that instead of trying to follow our natural inclination whenever suffering arises, to run away as fast as possible, but rather to have the discipline really to stick with that experience, right? And by maintaining that state of mind, being with that experience of discomfort, perhaps extreme discomfort, putting your mind in the position of confronting that suffering and being able to grow from that experience by not running in the other direction so quickly that there's no transformation. Right? Is that a good summary? Okay. Yeah, no, that's a really, really important. Anything else? Patience? And what you've learned so far? What does patience mean to you? I think we've covered a lot of it. Anything else? Okay. So I looked up the textbook definition, and Alexander Berzin, who's one of the foremost scholars in Buddhism these days, he gave two perspectives, very similar to what we just said. He said from the Theravadan tradition's perspective, patience is also sometimes translated as forbearance or endurance. It's withstanding the harm caused by others, shortcomings, mistakes, or cruel deeds. And then from the Mahayana perspective, it's remaining unperturbed by those who do harm and by any experience of suffering, so that one never becomes angry. So that's similar to the ideas that we've expressed so far, but the main point being able to withstand the harm caused by others, remaining unperturbed, unshaken by suffering. And the main point is to prevent anger from arising. So by being able to perfect this idea of cultivate to its utmost perfection, this quality of patience, Then when it's conjoined with the aspiration to help all sentient beings to meet the same goal of embodying perfection of patience, and wishing all others to be free from the dissatisfied states of mind that we experience, then this far-reaching attitude is what we aspire to, if we're Buddhist. And if you're not Buddhist, then just generating that wish that all others find happiness, right? Okay, and so one of the ideas that came up in the course of Rinpoche's recent commentary and teachings on the Mahabharata, one that struck me as being appropriate, particularly appropriate for today's topic, is this idea that the mind has the ability to grow infinitely, right? So we can cultivate qualities such as patience, love, and compassion. So those are qualities because they're related to the mind, and the mind is not physical, right? It's not constrained by physical limitations the way we're limited as to how far we can run or how far we can jump, right? Probably how tall we can grow, right? I don't know if there'll ever be people who are like 20 feet tall, right? Those are all physical limitations. So, even though people are running and training really hard and they can run a little faster every year or jump a little higher, then eventually there's going to be some physical limitation, I think. There's only so far, right? But with the mind doesn't have that kind of limitation. And so, when we talk about cultivating immeasurable compassion, immeasurable love, right? Love for all sentient beings, and there's so many billions and billions, actually infinite numbers of sentient beings, right? So you might think, oh, well, then that can't be possible, right? Like, I just can't do that. Why am I even trying, right? But that's not the case because, we don't have that physical limitation. So with that problem, not being essentially non-existent, not an issue, then our minds are free to develop, in those infinite ways. So I thought that was very inspiring. All right. So we've talked about patience. We just reviewed the definition, and we're inspired by the idea that we can indeed continue to cultivate patience for not just for our own shortcomings, right? So being patient with ourselves, being patient with what we can and we can't do right now, being kind to ourselves, acknowledging that due to our past experiences, due to maybe a lack of effort on our part, that we may fall short of how we would, like to see ourselves as behaving, and extending that same respect to others. Okay.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that last one?
So I was thinking that we need to cultivate patience, first of all, with respect to ourselves, right? But then also, thinking about other people in the same light, right? Being able to say, okay, maybe I have not been as gentle with myself as I should be. Likewise, others, maybe actually similar to what Beth was saying, maybe confronting or undergoing similar situations of difficulty, which causes them to act in certain ways that don't meet either my expectations or their expectations of themselves. And so being able to be patient under those situations as well. Karen.
What about, I think perseverance, is that equivalent to patient? I think it's not quite.
I think there's an aspect of that because some of the synonyms were like forbearance or endurance, which does kind of have a sense of perseverance, like not giving up, right? But there's also a whole separate quality, right, which is like joyful effort, never giving up. And so I think there's an overlap there, but it's probably worth maintaining that it's a different aspect of the same.
I think perseverance for me is sometimes you just sort of slug through it. You're just like waiting for something to change, waiting for something better to happen, or you're just run through that and just waiting, and with the understanding, at least with Buddhism, that you know that with impermanence it will change.
I know, the gritting your teeth and bearing it, right?
But that's, I think, not exactly the patience.
I think there's some of it, yeah. It's like sticking with it, right? Sticking with it, not running away, enduring the suffering as it is, knowing that it will change. Yeah. I think that's good. Forbearance, endurance. And then as we, grow, then the joy comes in, right? Where do we get to the joy? So it's not just gritting the teeth, but it's experiencing suffering and thinking, wow, like this is actually really important, right? And so there's a whole section actually in the Lamrim. There's a teaching chapter on patience, right? And it talks about, and we can touch on this a little bit, about how suffering is actually useful. It's actually really, really important. It's really necessary, as part of our spiritual path, right? Because how are we going to be able to grow our compassion, to grow our love if no one's testing us, right? And so in that sense, staying in the fire, right, is really important, because if that's not there, if you're not experiencing difficulty, then how are you ever going to grow? So just like, to give an easy example, right? So just like if you're a student in a math class, right, and if the teacher doesn't give you questions that are push you a little bit further, right, just take you a little bit out of that comfort zone, they're a little bit harder, then you're never going to grow, right? You'll never get any better, right? So likewise, when it comes to matters of the heart and mind, then the same thing. If there's nobody there to push your buttons, right, you never grow, right? So dog training example, because all of you know I'm still fostering this big hound dog that's driving me nuts, right? She's my best teacher because she's always testing me, like every day, who's walking the dog? The dog is walking me, right? So I need somebody, because otherwise I live all by myself, right? So that's easy. I mean, I'm so patient because there's nothing to test me, right? At all. So the dog is my best teacher, right? And she's very attentive, right? You know how we're supposed to be mindful, right? Watching our mind, see what our mind is doing, right? Mind going this way, mind going that. The dog doesn't miss a beat, right? She's just like, maybe because she's a hound dog, she knows. Oh, she's giving me a little slack there. Okay, I can go this way. Like, she's like locked on, focused. Very good. Very good. So we have to be the same way, very attentive to how our mind's like getting sneaky, running this way, running that way. Oh, I could have a little bit of chocolate or that second cup of coffee, right? What's going on? So little things, but it's really, really important, right? So any kind of hardship, any kind of suffering, whether you're on the road in the middle of the night and your car breaks down, that kind of scary suffering, or somebody who is your best friend, criticizes you in front of many people, makes you look foolish, whatever it is, right? All of those you have to think of as a welcomed opportunity. That's where the joy comes, right? You think, thank you, thank you. I know that was difficult, but thank you, because otherwise I'm just going to be, stuck on the road, not making any progress. So I really, really, really think that's true. So, so that, actually, I was thinking of in this session to do, maybe we'll do it at the end, but we're going to do like a meditation on setting your motivation again at the beginning of the day, and then something at the end of the day. So hold that thought. We can come back to it. Really being able to spend some time with that thought and thinking how you can, the minute you get up in the morning, go through that thought process. Whatever's going to happen today, I'm going to accept that. I'm going to welcome that as an opportunity for growth, right? No matter how bad it gets, how ugly it gets, how dirty it gets, whatever samsara, throws up, it's going to be, it's going to be good. Okay. All right. So, all right. So we'll come back to that. Yeah. So let's go back to this idea of expectations, and how do expectations influence our relationships? Since we were talking about expectations, how do expectations influence our relationships?
I think the expectations are likely to lead to suffering, disappointments. You want certain things. I mean, sometimes the good things happen, but then things rise and fall, and better not to expect, just accept what comes.
Yeah. Okay. So then expectations can lead to disappointment, can lead to frustration, right? So they very much, I think, color the relationship, right? And it's very hard not to have expectations of how somebody would treat you, how somebody should, act or react, right? So in any relationship, it's almost like a contract, not contract, but you meet somebody. Like, what if you think that the relationship is defined as a friend, then you have certain expectations, versus if you meet somebody and you go into the relationship knowing that it could be, thinking that it would be in an adversarial relationship, right? Then you have certain expectations just by having those categories, right? If you label somebody friend versus if you label somebody an enemy for whatever reason, right? Then automatically you bring all of that baggage, to bear, right, on that. Or even getting away from, like I say, we've got friends, we've got families, we've got enemies, right? So let's say, you are part of a group, maybe a friend group that for some reason doesn't like people who wear baseball caps, right? So then every time you meet somebody with a baseball cap, wow, you're gonna think, expectation for baseball cap wearing people, oh, they're X, Y, and Z, right? So every time you meet them, right? And then if you're a friend group that says that, people who don't wear baseball caps are the best people in the world, then you go in, and every time you meet somebody without that hat, oh, they're your best buddy, right? They would never hurt you, right? So likewise, like if you've ever traveled abroad, right? And you go there as the American tourist, right? And you're in Italy or you're in France, right? You stand out immediately. Everybody knows, here comes the American tourist, right? You got that big, I am the big American, the big dumb American, right? Plastered all over you, right? And you can feel how people see you. I mean, you haven't done anything. You haven't even opened your mouth, right? And they're already judging you, all those expectations, all that, past experience, right, comes at you, right? And may be very friendly, maybe not so friendly, right? But the point is just that, you know, immediately people are plastering you with their judgments, just as we do, you know, to them, right? It works both ways. Excuse me. So expectations have a tremendous influence on our relationships, and so being able to, you know, like stop and think through those, you know, identify those. If you're running into an issue of disappointment, frustration, some kind of conflict comes up, then, you know, you just stop and you say, no, wait a minute, where am I coming from? What were my expectations of this relationship, right? Because you know, if you have that set of expectations, right? Then when, like you were saying, right, when the expectations are not met, then of course you're going to experience discomfort, right? And so the problem is not, you know, out there with the other person. The problem was here in your mental construction of what the relationship should look like, right?
So in terms of, sorry,
Jackie.
in terms of the baseball cap wearing, what should you do? Is not join the group at all?
Well, yeah, being able to see and say, oh, look, you know, that's just something that came from, you know, our own prejudice.
Yes.
It came from our own stereotyping. Well, maybe I don't want to go there, right?
Yeah, so just not.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't be friends on Facebook.
Right. I mean, and you don't have to necessarily go out and try to change them,
Yeah.
but just like, oh, okay. You know.
Expectations keep us from being in touch, really connecting with anyone else. So living in my own little world of what the person is about, the whole relationships could be an illusion if you expect different things.
Absolutely. Right. So you're not really seeing the person as he or she really is. You're just seeing them as, you know, whatever. It's the movie star, or, you know, the prison inmate, right? You can't really see what the person is truly experiencing or feeling, or yeah. All you see is the label. So in terms of our relationship in terms of the expectations we have for ourselves, what do you think? Big question. What do you think are expectations for ourselves, like our own personal beings? What are my expectations for myself? That I should, like, be nice, respectful. What qualities do you think you want to grow for yourself? What kinds of expectations do you have?
For me, a big one is patience.
Okay, growing
Because if
patience.
I've done something I like, but I could do more.
Okay, keep going. Patience. Jude?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this actually lately. And I've kind of come to the conclusion for myself that it's important to be whoever I am, like in this moment, and to accept whoever I am right now in this moment. And overall, I know I'm a good person.
Right.
You know, I got that's an overall thing, you know, but it changes, there are shifts. There's sometimes anger comes up, sometimes frustration comes up, but it passes, you know, and just accept what is right now.
That's beautiful. Yeah. So accepting who you are right now, whatever bumps and, you know, color changes, right? Energy level changes, right? Interest changes, but you're still fundamentally a good person, and you still have that potential for infinite love, infinite compassion, right? Infinite wisdom, right? Everybody has that unbelievable potential, right? If we keep coming back to that idea over and over again, right? That really is, you know, the essence in a nutshell. Jackie?
I wish I could do that, but I mean, that sounds, no, I mean, it sounds really good on paper, but.
Not so easy?
Yeah, not so easy.
Okay.
And then also I feel, I don't know if it's through my job, like you have to push yourself to grow. So then I never think of myself as being, you know, this is fine the way it is now. I always end up wanting to do more. Which, I mean, in some ways I don't think is a bad thing either, just because I like to push myself further.
Sure.
So I'm never actually completely fine with the way I am now. Just because I want to grow.
Okay.
So I know that's not
So maybe
the
it's
way
both.
idea of thinking about it though. Because it should be more, you know, at one with who you are now. But, well, whatever, I don't know. Sorry.
No. I mean, I think maybe it's a little bit of both, right? So you know, if you can accept where you are now, right, and accept that, you know, there may be that the present moment is good, that I have, you know, that you have many positive qualities, right? And then maybe seeing occasionally that there are some areas, you know, where you could be a little bit less frustrated or a little bit less, whatever it is, you know, demanding or something, right? And then thinking, okay, I have this potential to watch, you know, my mind. I have this potential to be careful, to be patient with hardships as they arise. And in that way, like in a very gentle, kind of like a natural way, right? Then leaving the door open to cultivating, you know, these other qualities, right? Leaving the door open for future growth and improvement with the big I, right? The little I. Yeah, no, I think you're right. So the attitude towards our own behavior and attitude, our own behaviors and attitudes should be high, right? So I'm saying that it's okay to have expectations, you know, right? We're saying if you're Buddhist, right? And if you're not, that's fine. We're talking about enlightenment, right? A state of mind that's very, very, very big, right? Huge, big, open mind, right? Where the sense of self is very, very, very non-existent, right? That's big, okay? So, so that's a big expectation, right? It's a high expectation, and yet it's realistic, right? If we're willing to do the hard day-to-day work of, again, you know, accepting who we are, accepting all of the potential that we have, right? And being realistic, right? Not thinking that this is a change that can happen overnight. Slowly, right? Slowly, being able to, you know, on a day-to-day basis, on a personal interaction basis, on a conversation by conversation basis, right? Every time you're with somebody, right? Enlightenment is not like way out there up on the hill, right? It's in the ordinary dialogue that we have with ourselves, the dialogue that we have with others. That's where the change that we're talking about, you know, occurs, right? And then with respect to other people, what are our expectations with respect to others? And you hinted at that already a little bit, right? So if you are in a situation where somebody is very unkind to you, somebody treats you with disrespect, right? Then how do you react? What are your expectations going into a relationship?
I mean, honestly, you probably expect people to be nice to you. Yeah.
Well, okay, right.
But on the other hand, you know, if somebody does disrespect you or say something that feels initially harmful,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you can think about it and probably
Okay, right. But because we tend to do what? I mean, instead of like saying, whoa, you know, you try to put yourself in their shoes, right? You try to say, okay, there's a reason why, you know, they're in such a crabby mood, right? There's got to be a reason, whether they're experiencing physical discomfort, right? Like maybe they're in pain, chronic pain, or, you know, they had some kind of personal hardship, right? And so your expectations of other people should actually be pretty low, right? Should actually be pretty low. Like you're giving them the benefit of the doubt times 100, right? So Shantideva would say, what is it Shantideva saying about this? Right? Says, Shantideva would think of that in a couple of different ways, but what it really comes to, and I'll come back to the verses that we just read. What he's saying is that because, you know, all of our minds are clouded by confusion, ignorance, right? Because of our minds being overcome by a misunderstanding of the way things exist, right? Because of that innate confusion that we all experience, then of course, you know, just as we ourselves behave in a self-centered way, you know, acting for me, myself, and I, right? Then of course, you know, everybody else who's never even had a chance, never even had a moment of, to stop, you know, and consider their situation, right? Who's never even considered the possibility that our experience, our ordinary day-to-day experience is one of dissatisfaction, is one that's steeped in suffering, right? If they've never even had a minute to think of life in that respect, then of course, you know, they're going to act in a way that is in their self-interests, in a way that may cause you harm, right? So your expectations for them, you know, very, very, very low, right? Like they don't know that there's a class in here, so they're banging on the door, right? They're just little kids, right? So exactly. So you can go through that reflection, right? You can say, okay, well, this person is being naughty because they're a little kid, right? This person's driving me crazy because, oh, don't get locked out.
She hit her.
So cute. Maybe they're inviting us to go up and see the prayer flags. They're like, hey, what are you guys doing in there? You should be out here in the sun. Right? Okay.
Just stay there.
Aw. Bless one student. Yeah, we're gonna go. We're definitely gonna go. So likewise, you know, people have childish minds, right? Minds overcome by ignorance, just like us. Childish minds. Childish minds are ones that act, you know, maybe more spontaneously with less self-control, right? Or somebody else, you can say, oh, that person's just, you know, really old. That person's suffering from senility, from dementia, right? You got to give them the benefit of the doubt, right? So you try to put yourself, you know, in their shoes, right? So that's a really, really fundamental idea that we've talked about, you know, in the past. It's always worth going back to over and over again, right? So having those low expectations of other people because they are likewise clouded, their minds clouded by ignorance, right? Poisoned by ignorance, right? Only being able to see things from one perspective, right? They don't know any better, right? So you can't possibly, you know, blame them or get mad at them. That just shows, you know, your own lack of applying what you've learned. Okay, so now you know a little bit more, right? Particularly those, you know, who have been, you know, working with this material and studying this in the past. So you should know better, right? Now the burden is on us, right? Okay, we know a little bit. We don't know very much, right? That's our excuse. We don't know very much. We know a little bit, but we know enough, to be able to go through this process of thinking, right? Elizabeth?
But that also brings you right back to, we also have to have patience with ourselves.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
we have moments too where, it just kind of, everything just lines up and you dive right in, right? And,
Down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. And so, I think it's important to be able to do that. I think it's, one of my personal struggles that I have is to feel as if I don't do enough, so I got to do more. Or, so when I slip up or I jump down that rabbit hole, oh my God, that should never be happening. And it just does because I'm human.
Exactly.
And I make mistakes. It's just, what do I do when I make mistakes?
Right.
Right. And that to me is like the key.
Yeah, because you don't want to fall into the habit of, just beating yourself up, right?
Right.
A lot of
I'm never
self-criticism.
at that moment. Well, that's not what's happening here. What's happening here is I get all of these wonderful lessons. And I get these lessons, and sometimes I learn from them. Sometimes it takes me a little while.
Sure.
But yeah.
Well, you're good where you are, right?
Right.
Judith was saying, well, you're good where you are. And you try a little harder, in each direction.
Right.
And the universe will smile at you.
Yes, absolutely.
Eventually. In the short term and the long term. I'm
Isn't that
convinced.
an expectation, though?
Is that a big expectation for the universe?
Yes, the universe will smile. It's okay, even if you're not smiling.
There you go. Smiled upon or not smiled upon, it's all good. Oh boy.
I think the hardest thing about whoever the other person is, the other,
Mhm.
the hardest part, whether it's relative, friend, or work person, the hardest part is when they have the very strong sense that they're right.
Okay.
And the big I. The big I. And that's the hardest to take. Because they're implacable, they're unchangeable,
Sure.
and they're in your space or they're in front of you.
Right.
And either professionally, whatever, or family, whatever, it's very hard. A lot of times they're not listening. And so
Right.
you have to figure out, you're either going to retreat or forward or
Right.
sideways or something.
Right. Do I move out of the way, step aside?
Or give yourself time, separate yourself.
Right.
I had a niece the other day who, she suffers from depression, and mother-daughter relationship is difficult. And then she was saying it was one of those moments when my sister had one of those big eye things, big moments where she wasn't listening. And she doesn't really understand her daughter's depression situation necessarily fully. And so I was thinking, she's like, this is a queen bee moment. She's being a queen bee.
Yeah.
And that's one way to look at it. She's a queen bee. She can't be stuck in it. And I was trying to make her look at it separately, where I was trying to say, a queen bee, if you consider that just put a little queen in it, like picture it in a real bee suit, So you're a queen bee suit, with these little yellow.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's a great idea. Yeah. A little humor. Shake out of that perspective. Yeah. That's really good.
That's
Yeah.
what other people, that's when you're facing forward. Try to recognize that, change the dynamic.
Right. No, I think that's very helpful. And you have to do it, gently, tactfully, right? So they don't get, they're offended or bruised. But if you can do it just the right way, then I think that's a really, really good way to. That's a very good approach. Absolutely. So then, That's what I call my dog, Queen Bee. Her name is Beatrice. She definitely rules. Queen Bee. Yep, she's Queen Bee. And then from the karma perspective, going back to this idea of how our actions, have results, right? Then seeing somebody who is, being very, like you were saying, in your space, in your face, in your, then you can think that this is the result of, this is my coming face to face with the results of my own actions, right? So that person is only there giving me a hard time. That's the result of experiences, that I underwent, I underwent, in the past, materializing in this form. Right? So that's another way of trying to see through a situation, right? So if somebody is yelling at you, with a big red face and they're shaking their fist at you, like, right? They're getting all huffy and puffy and screaming at you, then that's your own karma, your own, the results of your own actions coming to bear, right? So if you can just kind of think of the situation as, if you can even just entertain the possibility that that's what's going on, even that's quite difficult, right? Quite difficult.
And what do you do? Do you avoid this person if they have it out for you? I mean, do you have to be nice to them, or if it's going to happen every time you meet them, do you just avoid them?
Yeah, so Karen, gave a few good suggestions, right? So, and humor, if you can, sticking with it, if you have,
I'm sorry?
staying in the situation, and just thinking, okay, this is my karma. This is the result of previous actions. This is impermanent. It's not going to last forever. There's something going on in this person's mind. Maybe I can just be empathetic. Maybe I can just listen. Or,
yeah, I guess it depends on how strong you're feeling that day also.
Yeah, the context. Yeah. Or maybe a situation like professionally where you really can't do anything. Yeah. Or maybe you can get up and give the guy a hug. Right? Like I was in the class in Nyack. It was in Nyack or it was here. Somebody was saying he has an adversarial relationship with his boss. Like he doesn't think his boss likes him. And so what does he do? As often as he can, he goes into the guy's office and hugs the guy. He's like, good morning, hi. He gives the guy a bear hug and the guy doesn't say, That's what he said. And the guy who said it, he's like this big, burly guy. Yeah, he's a big guy. Very sweet. I mean, I have to admit that's something that I would never have thought of doing. But hey. Yeah, no, he didn't want to be hugged. And the guy was just like, what did he do? He was just getting a bear hug. Please.
There is another thing that I've been taught. It's the process of equanimity, where you always think about this other person as, either stranger or someone you like, someone you don't like, and try to turn it into one neutral. Yeah. Whereas, where the process is like, this person is adversarial to me right now, but this person is like a daughter or a son of someone. This one, that, the mother loves the son, or the parent loves this, or the son, this is a father of someone, and the son loves his father. So it's just that your interaction with this person is like that's what. But to the other person, this is a loved person that is very supportive. So if you can recognize that, it's not just an evil person.
Right. And nobody is just exactly. No one's purely evil. Right? Even a lot of people love Donald Trump, right? I mean, maybe you may not personally feel that admiration, but Donald Trump had a mother, had a father, has children who love him, right? And a lot of people still voted for him and will vote for him. So, that's the way it is.
I have a question it's on topic, but if it's not on topic enough, we can
That's
do it
okay.
later. In terms of like feeling the natural like growth and expansion and even and joy that comes from a life like day in and day out of doing a practice like patience, sometimes I feel like I'm like missing, because I don't know, maybe because I don't have expectations of what it's supposed to feel or look like. I think sometimes I'm missing it. And what's my question? Like, we're so used to seeing what happiness and joy looks like, right? Like on Instagram and like their Facebook stories, and they're in the Hamptons and they're doing this, and like I'm not striving for that necessarily, but at least in kind of in those cases, it's like, oh, this is what it looks like. But in this case, like, are there any signposts or things to look for, like, oh, this is working? Because I know also in this tradition, it's important to rejoice, right? To recognize, like, oh, this is working. But what is it that I can like look for? Yeah,
That's a really interesting question.
I'm
Karen,
gonna
that's a
keep
great
going
question.
anyway, but I think
Yeah.
understanding like even little milestones could help me recognize more, like, wow, something's happening.
Do you find that your life has fewer bumps in the road? That things are going more smoothly?
No.
No. I don't know.
No,
I
but
set myself up for that one, didn't I?
I do see that, wow, I'm able to like pursue things that I probably wouldn't have in the past because of the discomfort.
Okay.
I mean, that's one
Okay.
thing, I
The
guess.
signpost, the most important signpost is a big signpost that says impermanence. In other words, you can be happy now, and then half an hour from now, you're not going to be happy. And then you can have a wonderful month, but then you're going to have a bad week. There's no such a thing as permanent happiness, and there's no such a thing as permanent unhappiness. You know, things kind of fluctuate. So if you take that kind of outlook that everything fluctuates, then you don't have to kind of obsess about being happy all the time, because there's no such a thing.
So patience, how do you bring that back to patience? Because that's what we're talking about.
Oh, patience. If you know that everything is impermanent, so then you have patience because you're unhappy now. You're patient because you know that soon
it's
enough
not
you're
going
going to be
to.
happy.
Right, it'll come back.
Yeah.
Bill, did you want something?
You don't swear at the cable guy until you hang on. little milestones. Yeah, you just, little ones day to day.
There you go. Karen?
I've been thinking, I think the core thing is, the thing that's so difficult for a lot of us is the major sufferings, which is aging, sickness, and death. So these are the big threes. We don't need these every day necessarily, but maybe in small parts, like every sickness, little sicknesses, or sickness of the blues, the depression, or not meeting your expectations. These three cores. So if you meet it, and like in the past, say maybe 5-10 years ago, you met these situations with like big emotions, big upset, big lows, big upset, big lows. But if after a couple of years, you're like, maybe a little bit not so upset, you've got a little bit more tools to deal with. You know how to, you've been there before, you've been there before, and you're figuring out what to do with the next step. So it's not as
A little more balanced,
it's
a
a
little
more
less
balanced. And then there'll be
oscillation.
times when, like, someone cuts you off, like, no big deal. It's fine. That doesn't bother me. Like that. So it's these. But if you can hit these three, aging, sickness, and death, and you're like, cool. You're like, whoa, that's pretty good.
I was listening to this song. I wanted somebody to listen to a song yesterday. It's a song that other people sing too, but this Peggy Lee sings this song, Is That All There Is? So she goes, oh, there was a fire in my house, my daddy took me out, is that all there is? Then she said she was in love with somebody, and then he left, and she was very sad and upset, is that all there is? And then at the end she says, I'm not ready to die, but then when she's dying, she says, is that all there is? You know what I'm saying? Is that a big deal about that? So it's a great, so if you want to listen, it's a great song. Is that all there is? Like Peggy Lee.
Talking about expectations there.
But sometimes, like Karen said, sometimes it works the other way. When you are young, you're very resilient, you're very like, screw everything, you're very strong. And then, depends how much abuse you get from life. When you get older, actually, you are less able to deal with things. You are more vulnerable, you are more things, you're very sensitive to things. It can work both ways, Depends what happened in your life, the vicissitudes of life, what happened, So you can be stronger later, or vice versa, you can be weak later.
Yeah. Spoken by the wise old sage. Uh-huh.
What I've kind of found, I came here originally, whenever it was a year ago, just because I was trying to find something, not even knowing what that was, but just felt like there was something kind of missing. And what I've realized now is there's really no finish line that I see or destination that I'm going to get to that I will then say, okay, this is it. And it's that process or this journey that I try to recognize as of value, as opposed to what I will achieve from that. I'm certainly not at a point where I think I'm Buddhist or trying to become enlightened. I'm just trying to be more content. Mm-hmm. And I used to get so frustrated playing golf, thinking, I would play, and then if another guy beat me or I had a bad day, I would feel this disappointment. And it bothered me, because it took like the joy out of I think that's probably expectations, but I found a way where I don't do that, where I just enjoy the event of the golf now more than the outcome of it. Mm-hmm. And even things like with my kids, if I expect something to go a given way and it doesn't, I would be very frustrated about it and getting a little better at not allowing that to happen.
Okay.
But through all that, and as other people have said, the ability to recognize that things are impermanent and that change will happen, it kind of allows me to be happier about the good things when they are happening, mm-hmm. and less struggle with the things that aren't quite the way I wish they were, and look at the big picture rather than these little events as they go.
Cable guys.
So that, like, I don't know, the signpost or the milepost for me is the attempt to continue to try to do the right thing. And
okay.
That in itself is kind of a different attitude or approach, or kind of a motivation than where am I going to get with this? What's in this for me?
Okay. Yeah.
So I don't know. It's just like a little shift of the way we look at it.
Sure. No, I mean, that's a very...
Nothing external has changed.
Of course.
Really.
Of course. No. Yeah, all of this is very much the inner exercise, right? But I think, it does translate to your external appearance, right? In the sense that if you're more patient with others, it changes your relationships. It changes your relationship with yourself, and then if you yourself are calmer and more patient, have fewer expectations of yourself, you're happy with yourself, right? You're not beating yourself up. You're in a good place. Then people will feel that energy. It's an energy shift, right? It's an energy shift. I want to do it divide you guys up into groups and do an exercise. But yes.
So getting on what you just said, an energy shift.
Uh-huh.
Because when we have these emotions, I know what's really helped me over the years is breathing. And because not only are we getting upset mentally, physically, we're tensing up, we're doing these, and it's great to think in permanence, but when my mind is all cloudy, I can't go there. I can't reason. Mm-hmm. It's more of a reaction instead of a response. So, one of the first things I try to do before I start doing anything is slowing down my breath, really breathing in fully, relaxing my hands, my jaw, because these are places that I really tense up and don't even realize sometimes, Before I can even come to that place of, okay, how can I, be more patient and do my practice? Because I can't do it when I'm all rigid.
That's a really good point.
There's this connection with physically to tap into that parasympathetic nervous system to just kind of
breathing over,
calm down a little bit first before I can move forward.
Absolutely.
I have a challenge of a really good friend, and that she's the first person that she's in the car with having a kind of road rage or rage with another friend because they did this and that, not at me.
It's very difficult to be around that energy.
And I just listen because I know like even made a move to another perspective, she'd say, "Don't lecture at me."
Right. Doesn't want to hear it. Yeah.
I was wondering what you would do.
Just be the rock. Just be the empathetic listener. And if you're there, if you're present with your breath, if you're just listening. And then eventually someday that opportunity that teaching moment will arise and she'll be there. Otherwise you're talking to somebody who's like this, doesn't want to hear it. So you have to be very, very patient. Wait for that teaching moment, right? Wait for her to ask you for your opinion, right? How come you're so calm? How come you didn't get upset, right? Really important. Same thing with dog training. You gotta wait for the dog to look at you, okay? I can yell at the dog as much as I want, right? Doesn't work, right? The minute the dog turns, is like, hey, okay, I'm looking at you, right? Gives me your attention, then boom. This is what you do, this is the treat, let's go, right? But until she fundamentally wants to change, until that fundamental opening is there, waste of time, waste of treats, dog's getting fat, right? The treats, wrong moment, wrong time. Okay, so let's try this. Since this is such a chatty group, we're gonna try to do a group exercise, meaning you get to work in small groups, and the question is, this is the question that has come up in several times, right? Is anger ever justified? All right, so we've talked about this in the Losang class before, but this is a chance for you guys to think about it. So we're going to break up into groups of 4, and 2 people can be people who argue, yes, anger is justified in certain cases, right? And 2 people will be on the opposing side and say, no, anger is never justified, all right? So just for fun, but I think it brings together in some way what we've been talking about this morning. And certainly if you're doing a Losang class, we talked about this, right? So groups of 4, we've got 4 people over here on the left. So you're together.
We just discussed amongst ourselves.
Yep, that's all. Very easy. Yeah, debating, because two people are, yes, anger is justified, and why. 2 people are, why anger is never justified. So Bill, Laura, Gloria, and Elizabeth. And you've got just 10 minutes, okay? So 11:20.
And then.
So what side are you on? Yes. You're going now? All right.
I'll be able to.
I'll be fine.
Can you give an example? Yeah.
Of course. I mean, I understand it's useful. Like, oh, okay, I don't know what's my boyfriend, and I'm so angry. I want to be better than her, or I did. And then, we study hard and we get better. So, anger is useful to other girls, like, better change. And then that becomes a karma, and we create another karma. That's not exactly what we want to do. And also, we have someone against this road, banning the guns, or burning the Amazons, right? They want to prove it. They have some reason. And we say, tell them, yeah, why do you stop doing it? It's not good.
You should know that. Studying this for a while. Yeah.
And then only creating another untried. Nobody likes it. You have our section in New York. Yeah, that's not exactly what we want to do. We have to demand someone to impose our opinion to others. Create nothing but trouble in my work. So we could use some technique to better understand where we come from. And we also have to understand where we come from. Why do they abuse using the right? And not allow Congress has to about 60 and 40. Where the scientists have to. And we have to understand, of course, endorsement, and a lot of people work for the factory to manufacture guns. They lose jobs, and because they want the rights to so that's why I think the anger is not necessary, always necessary. And I think we want to form ourselves mind, and we want to create something peaceful world, and if we get angry, that's kind of peaceful purpose. Yeah. And then and we try to create a peaceful world. I have to start.
Shows the I'm angry.
Okay, that's everybody.
No.
Oh, you can't. You have to. You want to speak also.
why do you have animals to defend ourselves right, from harm? That's I think that's easy. That was like a fight. Yeah. That,
I can't get out of the and then you put it on.
answer to our
You just made such a compelling argument. That's why I said what I was.
Yeah, you have to try.
To me, I look at it as whether it's justified or not. I guess whether the value to it was useful or the right thing to do. So I have to kind of separate those, whether it's a good thing or whether it's acceptable. It's all a different kind of consciousness. I think there's a base that happened to people where a reaction of anger is definitely
Physically harming someone.
I understand that. I understand.
Slander me at work to the point where it jeopardizes my job and just makes it totally not good. I would be angry about that. Now, how do I go about it?
Either you could do this, or those people do that I like to be
I would jeopardize or it would threaten my life. Be worried about things or even with restrictions in terms of
you have to use force to prove that.
be really different long-term. Whereas I was just, my guy has problems, he's suffering because he's suffering and take it out.
Oh, that's oh, that's so
I wouldn't want to do that. I would think I would be maybe sorry about it, but it was
You could be over.
It's a matter of, it becomes a matter of survival to you, right? Because you're losing a job and then like, oh, I'm not gonna survive, and then this guy did the thing for me.
Or if someone were to I decided not to do it, and I told that lawyer I wasn't going to be doing it, and they wouldn't give me back my even though we had not even signed a lease, there was no written agreement on this. And I started a phone call, I told them, this is very short notice, and I'm not going to do it on a different place. You know, I'd be happy to compensate a little bit, but I'm not going to do it. So she responds, okay, you know, what's happening over prorate the check based on where I rented. And then it was 2 weeks later, and then we started advertising. And I'm like, well, how can I get my money back? I don't even rent it. And then she wouldn't refund it at all. And I was angry. I felt, well, no, it was just a response. I mean, it's the question whether it's useful, there's the question whether the person
So it's good, you know, to keep it calm. Yeah. But it was-
Okay. So we've got 1 minute. You guys are having so much fun. Woo! All right. That's it. That's it. Back to work. Okay. Woohoo. So we're going to do a little bit of a debrief. If you want to share what you came up with. You want to just hit some of the highlights or one or two insights? Okay, so we just have a few minutes left. So the question was, is anger ever justified? And I left it kind of open-ended. And what I was trying to get at is this idea of, is there ever like a just cause for anger, right? So if, for example, if you have a deep, passionate, caring respect for like wild elephants or giraffes or, you know, some kind of wild animal that is now being poached to extinction, right? Then, you know, I think it's very natural for us to feel angry towards the hunters, the trophy hunters, and to all of the people who are killing those animals, right? So in that sense, you know, an anger, like a protective sort of anger, you know, might arise for those animals. But associated with that, I think a lot of you in your groups touched on this also, there's a related question like, is anger helpful, right? It's kind of a follow-up question. And so is the expression of anger going to make the situation any better or any worse, seen from both the short-term and the long-term perspective, right? So sometimes in the short term, particularly if you're in a relationship where you're in a position of being the power holder, right? Sometimes getting angry, like a flash of anger when you're in a hurry, right? A flash of anger can get you out of a situation because, you know, it's just like a quick burn and then boom, you're out, you're gone, right? So if you're in a hurry, it might work. But in the long term, you know, what have you done? You know, you said something quickly that you can't take back, right? That perhaps you've hurt somebody's, you know, feelings very deeply. And in the long term, you know, that could be a relationship that may be difficult, you know, if not impossible to repair. Okay, so any highlights from this group? Does anybody have anything you want to share just quickly? Seemed like you had a very dynamic.
Seems after the discussion, it's a little difficult to justify.
It is difficult to justify?
Kind of.
Okay.
Or it seems like there is an alternative.
Okay, alternatives.
Serve the same purpose.
Okay. Anything else? Now everybody's very shy because you had so much fun together.
I thought one thing that was interesting that came up for us is the question of like, okay, well, if there's no anger, then what would motivate action?
Okay, that's a great point.
You know, with the climate crisis or genocide, like these big things. And I was on I volunteered to pretend that anger is justified. So I was on that side, but I think that it is, and I think there was a consensus that it's possible to take action towards change or improvement or like for the sake of a cause without the motivating factor being anger necessarily. Like it doesn't, anger is not, or lack of anger or no anger is not synonymous with inaction.
Right. Just passively accepting whatever the status quo. Right. So anger in that sense, you know, is actually a stumbling block. It's actually a more of a problem in the sense that it can cause your judgment to not be clear, right? You could just be acting in a very perhaps biased manner. Whereas if you're free of either strong attachment or strong anger, then your mind should be balanced, right? And you're able to make rational decisions impartially. You're making good choices, not under the influence of the poison of anger or attachment. Good, that was a great point. Thank you. Anything else? No? Okay, so we're going to close. We have 5 minutes left. I always forget that this is a short class. It's only an hour and a half. So we'll close with a moment of meditative reflection. So sitting comfortably, beginning by focusing on the breath. Starting with a few longer, deeper breaths to reset. Returning the focus inwards. And so often we tend to focus just on the negative relationships, so the negative moments that we have during the course of the day. And so our mind actually has this tendency to do that. But we can train ourselves to do the opposite, to spend a few moments at the beginning of the day as well as the end of the day, really appreciating and feeling gratitude for all of the kindness that surrounds us. So let's do that now. Think of the kindness of your parents, your friends, your teachers. Kindness that's sewn into the fabric of every aspect of your existence. And if you can gently bring your attention back to the sounds in the room. Fragrance of coolness, freshness of the air. And when you're ready, open your eyes. So we dedicate the merit from today's meditations and discussions for the benefit of our own self-awakening. May the peace that we find within ourselves permeate throughout our relationships with others. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I have an announcement.
Okay.
Okay, well, our plein air tank is coming up very soon. It's a beautiful signs we're going to put up for the neighborhood. And that's September 14th, it's Saturday. And what happens happens there is that all these painters arrive and paint, and then there's an auction of the paintings they made and the things they donated, and it's a lot of fun. There'll be some snacks, there'll be some wonderful music. We have two great musicians. We have Laura's husband who's
Oh, wow.
guitar and sings folk
Oh,
songs
neat.
and things. And then we have this classical people who are coming, Stephen and Susan.
Oh, really?
Are going to be doing
Yay.
classical music, and yeah, it should be really nice because we have lots of music and they show, and it's a lot of fun. It really is. You can just watch people painting, and then you can enjoy. There'll be a meditation, which you're leading.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And what time does it start? Is it
It's going to start at 10 in the morning. With
10 in the
the
morning.
artists coming between 9 and 10 to register. And then
okay?
they go out and start painting, and then the actual activities are more like from 2 to 4. You know?
Okay.
So 1
1
o'clock
o'clock is
is
the meditation.
the meditation. So we've tried to frame, because they'll come in the morning and they'll start painting.
Yeah.
But the main kind of like public piece of it, I mean, of course, anyone can come,
Yeah.
is at 1 with the meditation, and then 2 to
2 to 4.
That's the-
is where you walk
the
around and see
auction.
the artists.
Okay.
We have someone
The music.
children activities. There's usually someone that comes with water paint.
Yeah, I hope.
Oh,
We'll have a little mini Dharma shop open.
That's right. Okay.
Yay.
And then it's just a really nice, it's a really nice day. Some of the artists that come are just phenomenal. And a lot of fun.
Yeah.
do you need volunteers?
We have a pretty set group, and anyone
Okay.
that wants to volunteer, of course, you're doing the meditation, so that's always a hurdle, so we appreciate that. But yeah, I have another project I'm going to be talking to you about, so for volunteering.
Okay.
So that's exciting. I have 2 other things that I want to mention. One is we have our annual fundraising event, which is scheduled on November 3rd at the Ridgefield Playhouse. It's titled Living Compassion 2. It features the Dalai Lama's niece, Tencho Gyatso, and Nawang Kicho, who's a famous Tibetan flutist. Janet Edley is going to be playing piano, and there's one additional student here that is a famous instrument. I can't remember the name of the instrument, but he may be joining as well. For those that attended 2 years ago, the premise of this is that we're using the life story of the Dalai Lama as a way to illustrate compassion in the world, for world peace, regardless. It's not necessarily a Buddhist theme, it's really illustrating his life in story, in music and pictures. This year, we're going to focus, we'll still do the entire life, but it'll be more in the later parts of his life, what he's been doing. And there'll be some addition of some actors coming in and sharing quotes. So John Cirillo, who's a long-term supporter of the center, is working on the production piece with Tencho and Nawang. The other thing that we'll be doing as a free event, is where I'm going to be looking for some of the help, will be a free public piece on Tibet Today. So an educational program on Tibet. Tencho will lead it with the president of the International Campaign for Tibet, Mateo Matto, and we're looking to have a refugee from Tibet come who lives in New York, kind of share her perspective of what it was like to live in Tibet, and in a very positive, non-political, middle way, compassionate piece, but to do as an educational. So we're offering it as a free event to support. This International Campaign for Tibet does all of this to help us as a center without any cost or any additional. So it's our way of supporting them. We also, any donations that we collect outside of ticket sales for the sponsor program, and I'll be sending it, we donate back to the International Campaign. So we try and make it a win-win for everyone. So that's really exciting, and it's on the website, but I'll be sending something out soon. I think it's at 7. It's on a Sunday. I get the timing mixed up, but the tickets are for sale at the Ridgefield Playhouse. I think it's 7 or 7:30. It's 90 minutes long. I think it starts at 7, but I would have to open up. It's on our front page of our website. It's also on the calendar of our website. And if you go directly to Ridgefield Playhouse, it's there as well. There's a clip of the first one. Who went last time? You missed it. Yeah, so I mean, if you want to say, I mean, it's, and I know you went as well. It's, it was probably one, and those that have never even, it's probably one of the most moving events, because you just see the incredible journey that this leader, this man has taken, and how in his way he's been able to bring compassion in this world. So it has a very uplifting feel to it. So I wanted to mention that. And then another exciting thing is, following that, it's not even on the calendar yet, we are going to be blessed with the Medicine Buddha tour from Sarah May. They will be coming here to do the Medicine Puja November 16th to 17th, but they're going to build a sand mandala here. We've been waiting for a long time. So they'll start building that the 12th to the 15th of November. So that'll be on the calendar soon, and there'll be some more details. But if you haven't seen that, it's really a beautiful opportunity to learn impermanence, but also to see the work of that. So we've been hoping they'd come here for years, so that's very exciting. So those are the highlights. We got a lot of things in the fall. So that's it. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,